Good morning. We would ask our friends from the Department of Corrections to be moving forward, and I'd like to call the Finance, Ways, and Means Committee to order for February 17th, 2022. Madam Clerk, would you please call the roll?
Representatives Campbell, Camper, Crawford, Faison, Freeman, Gant, Garrett, Gillespie, Hawk, Hicks, Lamar, Lamberth, Lynn, Miller, Ogles, Sexton, Shaw, Sparks, Todd, Whitson, Williams, Wendell, Zachary, Vice Chairman Baum, Chair Lady Hazelwood.
Here.
Madam Chair Lady, you have a quorum.
Thank you, Madam Clerk. And again, Mr. Wall, the Executive Director of the Tennessee Corrections Institute, if you would come forward with your team member. And thank you for coming on a rainy, yucky Thursday. We appreciate you being here and giving us an opportunity to hear directly from you on your budget request and give our folks an opportunity to ask any questions that they may have. So without further ado, we're going to try to be as speedy as we can today, given weather conditions, and we would just ask you to begin your presentation.
All right. Thank you, Mr. Chairman. Thank you, committee members, for having us today. Tennessee Corrections Institute is responsible for inspections of all the jails across the state of Tennessee, all of the training across the state of Tennessee, and the technical assistance related to local correctional facilities, your jails, workhouses, police lockups. This past year, we were tasked with starting the accreditation process for the Success and Reentry Act, which each facility may now get accredited and receive an extra up to $6 a day per state sentenced inmates with evidence-based programming in their facilities. We're one hearing away from getting the final rules approved, and at that point, we'll be able to move full speed. We finished everything we needed to getting that ready. There's not much to our budget request, but based on our new statutory requirement to perform accreditations, we did ask for one accreditation manager position and a 120-day employee. That was actually set in our budget prior to COVID, but with budget cuts and everything, we're just reintroducing that to the tune. It's a little over $157,000. However, I do believe that it may be included with the governor's budget proposal. But that's pretty much all I have. If you have any questions for me, more than happy to answer any.
Thank you, Mr. Williams. We appreciate Mr. Wall. I'm sorry.
That's okay.
It's been a long week, and I do apologize for stumbling around names and departments, but we are going to totally focus on the work that you all do. Particularly, you mentioned the reentry program, so I think we do have some questions about that. Chairman Crawford, you're recognized.
Thank you, Madam Chair Lady. The Reentry Success Act that we did in 2021 required that the institutes determine accreditation standards and inspect the local jails, lockups, and workhouses to determine if they were meeting that Tier 1 or Tier 2 accreditation. Have these standards already been developed? And do you have something you could send the chair lady and she could get it out to the committee?
Absolutely. We can send a copy of the standards. We have had our hearing on the emergency rules. Now we're waiting on the hearing. Our legal advisor, Tori Grimes with the Department of Correction, is still looking for a date that we're going to have the final hearing to where the rules are actually set. So all of that has been completed in conjunction with the Sheriff's Association, Department of Correction, and really all the stakeholders across the state. We've completed the training, and we're hoping to implement. We have all the pieces in place to roll this out. Training to all the local agencies has been completed, and we're in the process of providing technical assistance to each one of those agencies. So we'll happily send over the rules to you. Yes, sir.
Chairman Crawford.
Thank you, Madam Chair Lady. Just to follow up with that, are you saying that all the local jails have already been inspected then?
Not inspected for their regular standards, but related to accreditation, they've all been trained because the rules weren't approved yet. We've trained them. We're providing technical assistance to help things get put in place. We've work to get grants to. We have a lot of agencies out there. We're currently in the process of strong R certification and MRT training to have each facility certified in those items so they can move forward with meeting accreditation standards. It was offered to distressed rural. We've had about over 100 participants in each one of those classes. So we're moving right along. Hopefully the rules will get it passed as soon as we're notified of the final rules hearing date.
Chairman Crawford?
Thank you, Madam Chair Lady. And my final question would be, do you have any kind of guesstimation, or when do you expect to have all these inspections completed as far as for locals?
We are hoping once the rules are approved that we can complete any interested facilities accreditation within 6 months of notification. So I'm hoping somewhere in between rules approval and 6 months, I would like to have everyone who's interested accredited before the end of the year. In the legislation, it did say, or in the law, it says that the Department of Correction needs 6 months notice. So once those rules are approved, we're going to send out applications and we'll send the Department of Correction notice to say, hey, they're interested in accreditation, and we're going to move forward. So the day that 6 months hits, they're accredited and they're receiving that reimbursement.
Thank you, sir.
Yes, sir.
Madam Chair Lady.
And just a follow over too, when you say end of year, do you mean end of calendar year or end of fiscal year?
I would hope the end of calendar year, but with the hearing kind of being delayed at the moment, it may be next fiscal year before that initial wave of about 30 to 40 facilities is accredited.
Right, and I know we're waiting for final approval on all these things, but can you just kind of briefly give us an overview of the levels, tier 1, tier 2, tier 3, and how what separates those tiers?
Tier 1 is about the introduction of evidence-based programming and wraparound services, increased training for officers, those types of things to help support programming and reentry and reducing recidivism in the facility. And then there's a higher level of programming and more of an investment in mental health and those types of things in tier 2. I don't have all the standards in front of me, but it's just a build from tier 1 to tier 2 to say, hey, we're offering more programming, we're doing more things. Like tier 2 have a full-blown work release program where they're trying to get people job skills and those types of things. So in a lot of counties that don't have that, setting that up is going to take time. And we're attempting to help them right now to achieve tier 2. But at least with tier 1, they can get the process started and start receiving a higher level of reimbursement.
And then you said it's just a building process, so tier 3 would just be an increased level of participation in these programs, or how would that?
Tier 2 is an increased level in participation, having more programming opportunities, adding a work release program to that component goes into tier 2. The great news about the accreditation standards is they're optional, meaning that not every facility has to participate, but also once you get into the standards, if there's something that is costly or you can't get traction with your county commission to get behind, then they can opt out of some of those standards, up to 3 of those standards that are not mandatory. So we believe it's feasible for, at least today, about 80% of the facilities across the state to be tier 1 relatively quick. And that's just maybe a tweak of the policy or putting down what they're already doing and being able to track that so we can go back and look and say, hey, yeah, they're absolutely meeting accreditation standards.
All right, so that's tier 1 and tier 2. How do you get to be a tier 3, and would we expect to have anybody at tier 3? Or is that a long-term goal?
Well, we currently, we don't have tier 3 rules. They're only tier 1 and tier 2. The initial proposal was to have a 3-tiered process. Okay. But what ended up happening in deliberation is let's just make it a clear-cut line, 2 tiers, $3 for the first tier per state inmate, and then $6 for the next tier.
Okay, I apologize. For some reason, I thought we had a 3-tier.
You're absolutely
division.
correct. That was the initial proposal. Yes, ma'am.
All right, thank you. Representative Gant, Leader Gant, you're next on my list.
Thank you, Madam Chair. The proposed budget provides 4 positions and 4.9 million in recurring funding to expand a partnership with TBR and establish regional training sites for correctional officer training programs. What will be your role in this program?
With the TCAT right now, we had one pilot location in Elizabethton, Tennessee. We were partnering with the TCAT there and offering certification training and in-service for students. And what that did is create a job hiring pool for the locals in that area. We worked with a gentleman out of TCAT who was over the program. We developed it. Our instructors go in, teach the basic course, and teach the current in-service to all students. And the locals are able to come into that classroom environment as well to receive their certifications. So it's about creating a job pool. And then the program's been so successful, the governor's office decided to mirror that program to all 27 TCAT locations and 13 TBR locations across the state. So it's a pretty broad improvement to what they're doing, but we're going to have people who are trained, educated, and ready to work in your local correctional facilities across the state and that have that opportunity.
Leader Gant?
Last question. What will the recurring funding be utilized for other than the salaries and benefits?
Well, the mass majority of it will be used for contracting with specific training across the state. There are many rural, distressed, at-risk counties that don't have access to different types of trainings. A lot of things are expensive for a local agency to bring in. Let's say training on defensive tactics. Sometimes it'll cost as much as $1,500, $2,000 just to get an officer certified and those types of things. And what we're hoping to do is regionally be able to offer that to whoever it is. It's not the haves and have-nots related to training. Everyone's going to be professional. We believe it's going to reduce liability as well to offer these correctional officers the type of training that they need. Because training budgets locally we see get cut a lot. And we try to make up for that and do as much as we can. But this continued funding will certainly do that because and as well as the housing, because many agencies can't afford to send people over to, let's say, Knoxville, and they live in Johnson City. Maybe the agency doesn't have the money, but to be able to put them up for the agency and while they attend the training and receive a certification will be beneficial to the local sheriffs and local detention facilities.
Okay. Thank you very much for being here. I know I jumped right in my question without thanking you for being here. So thank you for being here. Thank you. Thank you, Madam
for
Chair.
having me.
While we're talking about dollars, I noticed that your reserve fund has gone from 2.2 million in 18 to 3.3 at the close of business for FY21. Can you tell us what the anticipated use of those reserve funds and what are we reserving those for?
The reserve, most of the reserve was really built up at the very beginning of when the Correctional Officer Training Fund was established. And our spending authority stops at a certain amount. And right now we're spending about, I don't know, roughly $1 million a year specifically on training and providing access to training. A good example is we have an initiative where we distress counties and at-risk counties, we're bringing them to conferences or providing specialized training such as a compliance officer training we were able to establish, as well as there are numerous CIT training, public safety network training, things that they maybe didn't have access to before. We're able to do that on a level each year, which we're hoping to expand that with this new funding that's been offered. So the reason it's that much is really at the beginning, we built it up to $2 million from 2013 to, let's say, 2015. I'm not sure what the numbers are, but now we've been able to push our spending authority and use that money what it was intended for, and that's pushing it exactly back to the locals. And it's been a great success. It's provided training like that never existed prior to that fund.
So I guess the only question I would have is we continue to add to the reserves. So if there's something that we need to look at to change anything so that you can actually put more dollars back locally, then I think that's something that this committee would be interested in hearing about. It's great to have reserve funds. We all, know that everybody needs to do that just as good business practice. But at the same time, when your reserve funds continue to build year over year, I think we need to look at maybe investing those in another way, but just food for thought. Chairman Baum.
Thank you, Madam Chair. Sir, you've talked a little bit about, I guess, jail inspections and certifications. About how many do you inspect over the course of a year?
There are currently 126 facilities across the state, and we perform those inspections of those facilities each year. Roughly about half have to receive a reinspection because maybe not meeting certain items within that. So we perform every facility each year per statutory requirement.
And about what percent get certified or recertified versus the percent that don't?
Currently, out of those 126 facilities, we have 5 that are not certified, with 2 of them being in one county. So, and at one point it was over 20, but we have worked with those facilities through technical assistance, going in, helping them with operational problems that they're having, and we're able to move them up, and now they're certified. So we're super proud to say that there's only 5 across the state, and we have quite a few of those 5 who are moving in the right direction towards certification. We're diligent about helping those try to become certified.
Sounds like progress. Of the 5 that are not certified or haven't been recertified, what are the common reasons why they don't obtain that status?
Oh, it varies so much from operational to staffing levels to the physical plant falling down around them. Essentially, there's so many factors. We could absolutely have about a 3-hour conversation on what that is. There's so many factors that go into that. But when you just can't get there, we work with them, and we just take baby steps along the way, and hopefully we can get them there one day.
Okay, fair enough. Thank you.
Yes, sir.
Chairman Hawk.
Thank you, Madam Chair, and thank you very much for being here as well. And as Leader Gant was asking this question, it piqued another question in my mind, talking about the training through our TCATs. I hear communication from my local TCATs in Northeast Tennessee, Greene County specifically. There's a desire to offer these courses to dual enrollment students in high school. You may have an 18-year-old who's a senior in high school who's not had the opportunity to go through this training, but he or she wants that career. What can we do, or are there age requirements, or what can we do to try to get the younger student engaged in this line of work to make a career out of it?
The certification, or to work in a local correctional facility, you have to be 18. So anyone who has that dual enrollment participating in that program as it expands, I believe they'll be an absolute great fit. In fact, the sheriff of my county, I live in Trousdale County, he brought me over to the TCAT and said, hey, can we get this and look at some dual enrollment? And that's absolutely on the table as far as TCI is concerned. I have to get it in. Once we come up with the master plan for the TCAT locations, then I'll have to get with the TBR and say, is this going to be a dual enrollment possibility? But 100%, I agree with you. It creates a job pool that's struggling out there right now. The local agencies are struggling with staffing, and this is a way to help them get qualified candidates, maybe not life experience wise, but education wise, certification wise, that they can receive that on the job training once they get there.
Chairman Hawk.
Thank you, Madam Chair. And just in the desire to make a career out of this, and that's going to hopefully going to help us long term. So I appreciate you looking at it and working with that as well. I want to go back to your funding sources, your revenue source. In your questionnaire, you filled out a dime on every completed call by local inmates goes toward funding, and that brings $1 million. As we're looking to increase funding, how is that collected? How does that come to you guys? Is it through the telephone carriers? Is it through the county clerk's offices? If you could address that a little bit, and what happens if we bump it to 15 cents?
The money comes directly from the carriers. That's what the law basically says. Okay, the carriers, you say in a jail you receive 1,000 calls, then the carrier at that point has to pay the 10 cent for those 1,000 calls, and then those agencies cut say cut a check to TCI through the Departments of Finance and through the Department of Finance and Administration, and it's placed over to the our specific IU. I mean, I got Finance Administration here. They can speak more of that language than I can, but it's to a specific account is how that is done. And we have our budget split in two items. Part of it training, part of it inspections, technical assistance.
Chairman Crawford, I believe you had another question.
Yes, thank you, Madam Chair Lady. We have another representative, Representative Campbell, who was talking the other day at the Northeast Correctional Facility. We've had a couple of workers that got stabbed and injured. Does Tennessee have any non-contact facilities? And how much more expensive is it to go to those type facilities?
Related to local jails, there's no facility that's non-contact, so to speak. However, there are those that aren't direct supervision. They're somewhat of a modified direct or an indirect supervision, where you have a unit and then at minimum once an hour, the officers go into that unit to make sure people are living, breathing, and doing everything necessary. And they kind of rove around and go into each one of these units within an hour, every hour. And then, cameras and someone in the control center is watching cameras, make sure if they need to call for backup in these areas, they can send them in there. And I would say it's, when you talk about non-contact, I don't think it's almost impossible to have non-contact because you have to go in, you have to see what they're doing, making sure that they're okay. And, ask them, talk to them, ask them questions, make sure that everything that they, that they're supposed to be doing, they're doing. And so non-contact, I would say difficult. Indirect supervision, I would say the majority of the jails across the state of Tennessee are indirect supervision. And but there's always a risk. It's a dangerous job. And it doesn't matter if you're in a state prison or a local jail. It is a very dangerous job.
Thank you. Thank you,
Yes,
Madam
sir.
Chair.
Thank you, Mr. Wall. We know that we talk a lot, we're hearing a lot every day about police officers, corrections officers who, it is a dangerous job. And I think the training that you all provide, all of those things, certification of the jails to make them safer places for both the inmate and those who are overseeing them is certainly necessary and appreciated. So we thank you for taking the time to be with us today. And I don't have any other questions on my list. So we will move on and ask our Attorney General to be moving forward, and we'll continue our hearings there.
Thank
But
you.
thank you so much for coming.
Thank you, Madam Chairman and committee members.
Well, welcome, General Slatery. We are just delighted to have you here and look forward to your presentation. Let us know what's going on with the budget for all of the fine work that you all do on behalf of the state of Tennessee.
Thank you, Madam Chair. We're happy to be here. Thank you for giving us a few minutes to talk about our office and our budget. And so to begin with, Herbert Slatery, honored to be the Attorney General for our great state. I would like to introduce Jay Dickerson, who is to my right, your left, who is the Chief of Staff and has a lot more granular information on the budget than I do. And then Pete Napatalung is behind me. He's our fiscal director. So hopefully between the three of us, we'll be able to answer questions for you. We do have a PowerPoint presentation. Thank you that it's up. The budget is pretty simple. We're basically asking for a status quo budget with two exceptions. Our total budget request is $58,036,800. And that includes the mandatory statutory constitutional increase for the AG salary, which is 12,700. The second item is a market compensation adjustment. Last year, we requested 1.5 million to help us be more competitive in the market for recruiting and retaining our good lawyers. And we were granted by you and the governor 300,000 of that. So we've come back and asked for the balance, which is $1.2 million. And I would point out that it's included in the governor's proposed budget. So those are the only two changes. The next slide is what would we have tendered for reductions. If there's a reduction, it's basically a payroll deduction. Our 80% of our budget is related to personnel, so that's where that would come from if there is a reduction. And that's all the numbers I have to go through. I did want to, if it's okay with you, to go through a few bullet points to update you on what we've been doing for the last year or so. The first budget is, the first bullet number is the national settlement for the two national settlements on the opioid litigation, which I'm happy to report is progressing. You may recall that we had a national $26 billion settlement with three distributors and one manufacturer. And that is proceeding, and hopefully by the end of this month, we will know if the defendants, the distributors and the manufacturer are going to go through with it. I will tell you that we've got around 46 states and territories signed on, and then last session you worked with us to pass a structure for handling those settlement funds and setting up an opioid abatement trust fund that's going to be managed by the treasurer, and an opioid abatement council that will determine where those funds are allocated. So we're proceeding with the hope that we'll be able to finalize that big settlement shortly. We did settle with a consulting firm. There was a states-only settlement. Tennessee is going to receive $15 million, and 12.6 of that we already have. So we're ready to, as I say, ready to roll once the council's in place and can start making decisions. So that took a lot of work, but so we're happy to be where we are. The second bullet point is a lawsuit where we and 19 other states are challenging the recent regulatory guidance and interpretation, which granted new rights to transgender individuals. And we are challenging that in the Eastern District of Tennessee in federal court. That guidance granted access to locker rooms, showers, and bathrooms. It authorized participation in athletic events based on gender orientation, and then it mandated the use of preferred pronouns. I'm sure you've read about all of those things, but we are in the middle of that lawsuit. We're leading two multi-state federal lawsuits challenging the recent national vaccine mandates. That's the OSHA mandate and the federal contractor mandate. The OSHA mandate, we won in a 6-3 decision at the U.S. Supreme Court, and the OSHA rule has actually been withdrawn. The federal contractor mandate case, we do have an injunction. It has been enjoined, and it is currently being appealed at the Sixth Circuit. Speaking of the Sixth Circuit, we also won the 48-hour waiting period case for abortions, a victory that there have not been very many victories in that area, but we have that one. So, and then we're continuing to defend the challenges to your statutes that you've passed on abortion and gender requirements for school sports. We're defending the BEP case. and COVID-related legislation and executive orders. We successfully enjoined the federal government, the tax mandate that was included in the American Rescue Plan, interfering with states' rights to determine on tax policies, and that's on appeal at the Sixth Circuit. No, excuse me, that's on appeal, and I'm happy to report, and this has been a long time in coming, that we won a unanimous decision in the U.S. Supreme Court on what I call the Mississippi Water case. Mississippi sued Tennessee, Memphis, and Memphis Light Gas and Water. We've been at it for 8 years, and our local government in Memphis and Memphis Light Gas and Water have been at it for 16 years. So, but we've received the decision that we really wanted. It was absolutely dismissed. So they would have to start all over again if they wanted to do that. And finally, some of you are aware of our Consumer Advocate Unit. Our Consumer Advocate Unit represents consumers before the Tennessee Public Utilities Commission. And I just wanted to point out that that we've been able, and since November 2020, to achieve annual savings of around $20 million for Tennessee consumers off the requested rate increases. So those are some highlights of what we've been doing. I think I've mentioned the 1.2 million that we're requesting for compensation adjustment. We're experiencing what many businesses and law firms are experiencing as people come out of the pandemic. They're looking at work a little differently. They're looking for flexibility. There's a lot more movement. We've actually had more departures from our office in 6 months than we had for the previous 12 months. So we're seeing some significant changes, and this will help us be more competitive. We obviously are not going to be competitive with private firms on a dollar for dollar basis, but this will help us. We don't want to lose them to other government agencies, and we've had a fair number of those instances. So that's the basis for our request. So I've done a lot of talking, but we're happy to answer any questions that you might have. That completes our report to you, and happy to answer questions you might have.
Well, thank you, General. And you did a lot of talking, but you guys have been doing a lot of work, and much of it at the direction of this body. So we thank you for that work, and I think we're achieving some positive results. So that's always good to hear. I have Representative Miller on my list first. I think he might want to speak with you about some things particular to Memphis and the subject you brought up. So Representative Miller.
Thank you, Madam Chair. And thank you all for being here. And I noticed you had a bigger smile on your face when you talked about the aquifer and the lawsuit. And it's good. We won that. But my question is, how much money did we spend on the lawsuit, and will we be able to recoup any of those dollars? And if so, how will we recoup those dollars?
We will not be able to recoup the expenses that we spent on our lawyers. We will, and we've spent about $4 million over the years on the case. We won, and they spent a lot of time and effort and lost.
Chairman Baum.
Thank you, Chair Lady. I've got a question about two lawsuit settlements. The first one's the opioid lawsuit settlement. My question about that one is, how much of the settlement money has been distributed or been awarded to Tennessee, and how much of it has been distributed out to different people and entities?
Chairman, we have not finalized it yet, and we hope to have some really good news by the end of this month. So there's been no money distributed. The numbers are in place. The allocation to Tennessee is approximately $600 million over 18 years. That's the big settlement. And that's going to be dispersed in accordance with the statute that you all passed last year. So we hope to get the money. I hope I'm optimistic that we'll get funds in May, but but we still have a lot of steps to go forward nationally to get that done. Tennessee is in really good shape. We've had I think all 95 counties have signed on. All of our major cities have signed on. All cities, I think, in excess of 30,000 have signed on, or the vast majority of them. So we've still got a little bit of work, but we're much further along than some other states.
Okay, thank you for that update. And I've got one more question about a second lawsuit settlement. It's the one that involved predatory student loans.
Yes.
And I guess my question there is, how many Tennesseans were involved in that lawsuit? And I think there's about, I don't know, $2 billion there. How much of those proceeds have been distributed?
You're talking about the Navient settlement. If I could, I'll give you specifics because I know you have an accounting background and you probably want specifics on the numbers, and I can get those to you, and I'll try to do that today. But I think we had around 2,000 Tennesseans that were affected. Most of the money is going to be used in terms of loan forgiveness. There's going to be restitution to each Tennessee consumer. It's I think it's less than $1,000, but the big bulk of it, and then there's all sorts of injunctive relief, sort of tying the hands of Navient going forward. But it was a significant settlement, and I think I came out and said this. I think student loan servicing is just a mess, and this is one indication. And this is not going to be the last time that we play a significant role in a student loan servicing matter.
And how will Tennesseans be notified of any award they might receive?
I think they're going to get 2 notices. I think Navient has to give them a notice. I think there's an administrator, and then to get the money, all they have to do is to go on their site, on the website, find their account, which they're used to, and be sure that the address is correct. And then if that's true, they'll get the check.
Okay. Okay. Thank you for that information, and thank you for your hard work on all these cases. These are important cases, and a lot of folks are aware of them. Thank you.
Chairman Hicks.
Thank you, Chair Lady. General Slattery, good to see you and your staff here this morning. Just, you did mention a cost increase already that's associated with salary adjustments. I think you mentioned 1.5 million last year. This year, an additional 1.2 million has been proposed. Once that has been applied to your budget, where is that going to put you as far as, are you going to be competitive at that point as far as the market is concerned?
Well, we asked for, let me just, for the record's sake, we asked for 1.5 last year. We only got 300,000. So we're asking for the balance of the 1.5, which would be 1.2. And it will be, now we probably wouldn't turn down if you wanted to do more, but it'll make us more productive. We went through the study with Mercer, and they gave us some good background on it. And I think it will be really helpful. Things changed, and obviously it's a fluid market like any business or profession, but it will be of great help. And retaining the experienced lawyers is the issue that I think about an awful lot, because I mentioned these lawsuits. They're handled by people, attorneys who've had 10 plus years experience normally, and those are the ones we want to keep. And we've lost a few, and that's not where we want to be.
Thank you. And I know one in particular you lost here not too long ago that I'm still pretty proud of, and we're still beaming up in Hawkins County, of course, mentioning Sarah Campbell. So what a great addition she's going to be to the Supreme Court. But thank you for being here. Thank you for your explanation.
Yeah, I'm hoping for an A vote from you. Yeah, we hated to lose Sarah, but as you all saw, she's exceptional and will be a great justice, hopefully for a long time. With the keeping her in Tennessee was fabulous. We had her longer than I thought we would.
There was a time I was the darling of Cherokee High School, and she has certainly knocked me off that pedestal. I'm just telling you what it was. Thank you, Chair Lady.
After hearing from the modest Chairman Hicks, we move on to Leader Lamberth.
Thank you, Chairman. General, I just want to say I fully support y'all's budget request, and I'll say this, for the consideration of this committee, and as we go through budget considerations, what you do not want when fighting some of the biggest lawsuits in the country is an underfunded attorney. So I say that as someone who practices law, if you want good representation, we have to fund it and have the ability for them to be able to make sure that we can win in court. And so, General, throughout your entire tenure as Attorney General, I just want to say that we have recognized the fact that just about all you ever do is win. I mean, and I know it absolutely drives you to a point of frustration when you do not win. And I appreciate that in an attorney, on someone who hates to lose more than you like to win, because when you win, the people of the state of Tennessee are in better shape, because the lawsuits that you're fighting, dealing with elections, dealing with opioid settlements, dealing with large companies taking advantage of sometimes of folks, and small companies. I mean, it matters what you've done. And I know you've been recognized recently as the best attorney general in the United States. And I think that is a recognition that was long overdue. So I merely just want to say thank you for the work that you've done over your time as Attorney General, and just hopefully we will be able to fund this request in this budget, because it is definitely needed and I think overdue. Thank you.
Thank you, Leader.
Representative Garrett.
Thank you, Madam Chair. General, thank you for being here. I've enjoyed getting to know you over my time here. You're a great lawyer, and you represent Tennessee well. So I really appreciate you being here, and I hope that we can also support your request today. But I do have a question that may be hard to answer. But when the state of Tennessee is involved in litigation, especially those that entice our federal government to overreach, and we have to get involved and kind of hold their feet to the fire, so to speak, I'm kind of wondering, how do we quantify what that costs us to be involved when we join lawsuits and from other states? How do we quantify the cost of that? Do you have any insight into how that's determined?
You know, it is, like you said, and by the way, I've enjoyed dealing with you, and you know what I'm saying, a lot of times I don't do it really adequately, but somehow you figure it out. So it's really difficult, to be honest with you. You know, for instance, the lawsuit on the Title VII, Title IX cases, you know, we're leading that. So we're the ones that are doing all the pleadings, and we're getting buy-in and help from the other states, but we're up front doing it. And so we've got a lot more invested there. We've got 4 or 5 lawyers working on that. And but there'll be other cases in which we play a lesser role. And so and the only way to really quantify it for you all would be for us to keep our time. I probably would lose half my office if we were required to do that.
I could probably second that.
So I think that's really the only way to do it. But it's something that, I mean, we think about in terms of resources and how to allocate them, and like other states. And I will say this, and you all mentioned the award, which is a fabulous award. I would never have been considered for that award had I not had the staff that I have. And I mean, that's just plain, simple truth. And but you all would be proud of the way Tennessee's seen nationally. And when we're trying to join a case now that somebody else has started, so they're trying to amend the complaint. We're the ones drafting the complaint, the amended complaint. You know, and we have been described as, when Tennessee walks in the room, there's a real lawyer in the room. So, and some of them have been nice and said things, but I think that goes all the way back to the history that we have and how the Attorney General's appointed.
Well, just one more comment, General. Thank you, and I'm glad to know that Tennessee's still leading. So thank you very much for that. Very, very much appreciated.
Chairman Todd, you're recognized.
Thank you, Madam Chair. Just have a quick question about the Consumer Advocate Unit. And I also want to echo the compliments that others have bestowed on you, because you've definitely, your office has been very responsive when we've had requests and just need information about things. So we really appreciate that. But the Consumer Advocate Unit, I noticed the comment you made about them earlier, and I was just not familiar with that unit. Do they have any involvement in, I guess, enforcing state law on political subdivisions of the state that may not have oversight otherwise? For example, utility companies that publicly own or again, subdivision of the state, energy authorities that may overstep their bounds. Do they have any responsibility there, or is there a possibility for them to do anything on behalf of the public?
The answer to that, Representative, is generally no. The consumer advocate is, we represent the consumer before the Tennessee Public Utilities Commission, who regulates investor-owned utilities. And these are investor-owned utilities that, that have monopolies. They don't have any, there are no market forces to regulate the normal rate increases and things like that. So when they propose a rate increase, then we file a motion or a petition to intervene on behalf of the consumer to look at that rate increase. And we're one of the, maybe not the sole, but we are a significant check and balance to that rate increase. We're the one the advocate is the one who puts together the record that the Utilities Commission relies on when it makes a decision. And I think if you ask the TPUC, putting that record together is very strenuous, but it's very important. And these companies are monopolies, and frankly, they should go through a very rigorous, robust review of rate increases, because you and I pay them, the businesses you operate in your district, they pay them. I mean, this is a significant role that they play, but we're not an enforcement arm against the utilities. The commission can review things, but we're not.
Okay, thank you for that. I recognize, and I doubt many other members on this committee actually recognize, that those political subdivisions of the state, the energy authorities and utility divisions that are locally owned, are not regulated. There's not an entity in this state that oversees what you just talked about, the rate increases, and they have monopolies. And when they do things against state law, as you have opined in a few requests that we've made, it's up to the consumer to file a lawsuit and enforce state law. And I find that pretty appalling, and hope that we can see some efforts in the near future to get that changed. Thank you, sir.
Representative Lynn, you're recognized.
Thank you, Madam Chair. Leader Lambert stole my thunder. I just wanted to say congratulations.
Thank you.
All right, well, General Slavery, that completes my questioners at this point. Again, we do very much appreciate the hard work, and it's an incredible amount of time I know that goes into these cases, and a lot of long hours, and again, many of times you are doing that at our behest or because of actions that we have taken. So we continue to provide work for you. I hope you appreciate that you have, job security in that regard. Don't see any of that ending anytime soon. But again, you do a marvelous job. It's been recognized nationally. What else can we say? But I appreciate the fact, and I'm sure your staff does too, that none of us do any of this alone. So it takes a lot of folks to make that work. And hopefully we can get you the money that you need this year to reward folks for being there, bring in some new folks, and so that we don't have a lot of turnover because these cases are complex, and I can only imagine the kind of time that it would take to bring somebody new up to speed. If you lost one of your key people had been working on one of these cases. So we need to do all that we can to keep them over there for you, and we will try our best.
Thank you, Madam Chair. It's always a pleasure to appear before you, and I've enjoyed working with every one of you over the years. So we appreciate the few minutes that you give us to tell you about our office. Thank you for all you do.
We may have a couple of other questions. There's some members, because of various situations, who aren't here today, and there may be a question or two, but we'll forward those to you. But
Happy to
again,
address them.
thanks for walking all the way over here in the rain or driving. Hopefully you drove so you don't look too damp. So.
Thank you.
Thank you. We have, and thank you all for moving up to the table without prompting. Help us move forward as we're doing some housekeeping things up here. But welcome to Mr. Guy Jones, Executive Director for the DA's Conference, and for his able assistant there at the table with him. So, Mr. Jones, we'll ask you to go directly into your presentation.
Yes, there we go. Thank you, ma'am. It's hard to follow a gentleman of the stature of General Slattery. We've had a lot of contact with him as he's been Attorney General, and it's always been great. I'm here today on behalf of the District Attorneys, Guy Jones, seated beside me, Zoe Sams, our Deputy Executive Director, and we have a couple folks seated here on the front row. Tammy Hancock, our Fiscal Director, and Brian Jeffries, who's new with us, who is Assistant Fiscal Director. We just have a few slides, and we want to be respectful of your time. But we do have a situation that we want to make everyone aware of about the critical needs that we have throughout the state. And Deputy Director Sams has helped highlight those, and we'll be eliminating those as we go along. One thing that I always need to do, and I know that most everyone knows what a DA does, or, you think about the courtroom work, but there's just a lot of other things that go on, from the investigations, the vulnerable adult protective teams and the SIPIT teams. But the main thing is that every single criminal charge has to be reviewed by a district attorney at some point. And then if they go forward, it's a district attorney that does it. We don't have any outlet to hire outside counsel and that sort of thing. There's a number of specialty courts that we staff, and they take a lot of time because just moving it through the normal process is pretty cut and dried for a lot of cases. But when you have specialty courts, they have to touch the case file and work multiple times. So it's important that you know some of that as we think about the 1,152,997 cases that were handled in the last year. That's that big red bold block there on that slide. 1,152,997. That is just incredible when you find the rest of the story. First, before we get into the caseload, I thought I should tell you what the request is for this year. You have here on the left a blue block, dark blue, that has expansions. Now, we were asked by this budget office from the Department of F&A And also, in the last year or two, the Senate Finance Committee asked, why don't you put your expansions, we want you to put your expansions in on the front end that you may be able to fund from existing resources. So that's the way we did it. And we started asking for 4 assistant DAs, 2 secretaries, and 2 victim witness coordinators. And during the course of the fall, that was changed a little bit. And so it was 6 assistant DAs, 4 secretaries, and 4 assistant victim witness coordinators. On the right-hand side, we were so pleased and fortunate that the governor included additional, this is new funding for 20 positions. Those are secretaries, assistant victim witness coordinators, and the criminal investigators. What we sorely need, even though we're so grateful for what we have, we need assistant district attorneys. And that number on the first page, about the 1,152,000, begins to make sense in terms of caseload. We have collected data about case statistics for some years, but we basically used it to compare between the districts. What we didn't do, and what Deputy Director Sams realized soon after arriving a year or so ago, we needed to divide that into the number of people that are available to do the work. So on the next page, you see caseload information going back historically for several years. Now, our request is not going to solve those huge caseloads, but it will make a difference. It will make a difference. And Director Sams, you have firsthand knowledge of how we arrived at this and the critical need.
So this past fall, we decided to do some research and collect some data so that we could better understand our needs. And also, we could explain that to you, to the governor's office, so it's more data-driven, our ask and our approach for budget. So what we did was we collected all of the case information available through the administrative office of the courts and from county clerks. And so that is how we collected the general sessions and criminal court case totals that you see here. On the left side of the screen, you will see the historic caseload average for the last several years. And so for FY 2013 2014 to FY 2018, 2019, you can see that the caseloads grew by 20%, but our ADAs only grew by 6%. And that 6% also includes county-funded positions and grant-funded positions as well. So that just goes to highlight the point that our position growth is not keeping up with the rise in caseloads that you see there. So the average for FY 2019-2020 was over 2,000 cases per ADA. And that ranges from misdemeanor cases to felony cases. So that includes homicides and simple assaults, things like that, or criminal trespasses. And the other note there is that the pandemic has also just made this issue more serious. We have found, we did just a random study for 3 rural districts to try to pull some case information. And we found that in criminal court alone, if we took September 21 data compared to September 2019 data, on average, those assistant DAs had 1,000 extra cases pending trial in just criminal court alone. So that gives us some idea of a backlog that we were seeing because of the pandemic. From surveys done throughout the country, that seems to be pretty consistent. And then on the next slide, what we also wanted to do, instead of just having the historical comparison within our own state, was look at how we compare to other states. And that is what was probably the most shocking difference that we found. So in this slide, we listed some of the states that we found so far. And in that first bullet, you will see that South Carolina put together a budget report, their prosecutors did, and presented that to their finance committees in 2018. and found that their caseload average for general sessions courts was a little over 360 cases per ADA. In Tennessee, if only our ADAs just worked general sessions cases, their case total would be 1,847. So it's a very, very big difference. And Florida, you'll see that as well. In Missouri, you can see those totals. So Florida, their case average was 570 per ADA, and Missouri was 466, where once again, ours is over 2,000 cases per ADA. The information for Florida and Missouri, we just got that from their equivalent of their administrative office of the courts as well. So it's the same type of data that's provided, and we thought that was the best way to compare apples to make sure that we were getting the most consistent information as possible. And then you can see in the last note there for Oklahoma, and this information came from their budget presentation where they were asking for assistance because they were in dire need. And at that time, their caseload averages were 300 to 400 assistants, or 400 cases per ADA.
We have not found a state that even approaches the caseloads that we have here. And we've looked, particularly in the Southeast, but there is a cost associated with not funding more assistant DAs over time. Our turnover, and General Slattery mentioned that they have had an exodus of personnel. That is going to go up. There are other implications from having that sort of caseload. And Deputy Director Sams can speak to that a little.
And there's been different research done on this topic to see what the impact of high caseloads would be. And some of those items would be, not enough time to spend with victims to explain the process to them, or help them through their testimony in preparation for court. There's less time to train young prosecutors. And so to a certain extent, it's a little bit of a sink or swim situation. You're kind of thrown in general sessions court. Potential increase in errors of cases, more appealable issues that then go up, and a potential to lose a case that if you had had more time for preparation and to work with your officers, it may not have happened that way. And then the other interesting fact that we found from some of the research was you actually have less time to work with defense counsel to consider alternative sentencing. And so if you have an ADA who's trying to process through the docket, they may not have as much time to consider the criminal history, to consider if this person is a good candidate for some of the diversion courts that are being created across the state. One note that we found in some of the research said that a case file that is going through a diversion court, a ADA touches that 25 times more than a case that's just going through the regular process. And so they demand more time. And so those are just some of the impacts that we have found from high caseloads.
We need help. The district attorneys need help. So we hope to leave with you either needing more information or understanding the need. And we're ready to answer any questions that we can.
Thank you, Mr. Jones, and thank you, Zoe. I'm sorry that was informal, but we appreciate in really digging down into some numbers. I do have several questions, but before we get to those, Chairman's prerogative, you mentioned the turnover issue and the many impacts of heavy caseloads. We see it with social services. We see it in lots of places. But what kind of turnover have you seen this past year in your organization?
Our current turnover is a little over 5% for assistant district attorneys. Now that may not sound like a tremendous amount, but 25 or 30 each year out of 454 state paid, it does cause us to lose experience. Most of those are going to the private sector where they can find much better compensation. And that doesn't really include the COVID. I don't really have absolutely current data on COVID year.
So in that regard, your requests for additional personnel and additional funding for the personnel you have in place? Is your budget request, you're asking for additional positions?
Yes, ma'am.
Is there also, and I apologize, I just haven't dug that into it, are you asking for additional raises for
The
those who are already in your,
there is our service and experience credit system
right?
that allows the attorneys
regular
and
step
criminal
raises.
investigators to move along in the scale. But there is no general improvement to that. We're not asking for an increase that
Right.
would
I
just
just
raise
wanted-
all salaries.
Just wanted to be clear
Just to
when you
fund
mentioned that they
what's-
might be leaving for private pay. And one other question, and then I'll get to the list. In all of these cases, which is a huge number, what percentage of those are pled out? What percentage actually, go through the trial process? Do you know?
I believe it's about 89% now. You have
And for the most part, that information, especially in criminal court, is collected by the administrative office of the courts. But at this point, I think we're still uncertain of in general sessions what that looks like. But typically, I think the national average is usually 80, 90, 90%. Of course, sometimes that can be that they're actually pleading to that charge, to the appropriate charge, to the minimum, or it could be a sentencing hearing, things like that. So just because you see a plea happened on a case does not mean that it was a reduction in a case as well.
Just means there wasn't the trial process.
Yes.
Okay. All right. Chairman Williams.
Thank you. Thank you for your being here today. Just a quick question. Last year, I think we put a little over $784,000 in the DA's conference for IT expenses related to some evidence of and some software needs. How's that process going? Where are you in the project? Can you share that with us?
Yes, sir. Yes, sir. Most of that funding last year was to improve, extend the case management system to, I believe, Knoxville and Shelby County. And they had not been on the same case management system as the other 27 districts. I believe Hamilton County and Davidson are still on a separate system. They grew up just as the conference did, and they had resources in the big cities, and they developed case management systems or something that would serve as a case management system. So we're trying to extend that to Knox and Shelby counties in the short term, meaning this year. This product that we're going to go to called ProCase is 99% finished. We will begin rolling it out in the 2nd Judicial District, that's Sullivan County, in the next couple of months. Then the 13th Judicial District, which is sort of the Upper Cumberland, Cookeville, Crossville. They have been the guinea pigs on numerous innovations. They're very receptive to technology and improvement of that nature. So then we will be able to refine it a little and then train all the districts that are capable of. Davidson and Hamilton would not be yet included. No funding for Hamilton and Davidson to be on this system. They have a system, and they're not asking to be on it at this point.
And is their system compatible?
That's one of the issues. For instance, in Shelby County, that we have to merge the data that's there. We don't want to lose the data, and that's a big system, of course, already in place. So that's one of the issues. Is our system is still being finalized, this ProCase system, and we want to make sure that it will bring in existing data. We hope that Hamilton and Davidson eventually are both in the system.
But under the current systems that they have, it won't be compatible with the system that you all are inputting for the rest of the state?
I can't say that it won't. I just know that they have not asked yet to be integrated into it. And we've sort of got all we can do. Shelby County's still months out, and so is Knox. We've not really tested it yet in any district as a live product. That's again Sullivan, second district, and then the 13th district, several counties in the Upper Cumberland. We've done it this way before when we've rolled out new products related to technology. We'll get there. I'm confident over time.
I guess, and maybe I'm not clearly stating my question, but do we know if there is compatibility between the systems in place in Hamilton and Davidson and the system that you all are doing, or will there at some point in time Hamilton and Davidson systems will have to be upgraded or changed, whatever the appropriate terminology is, in order to integrate into your system?
I can't give you a definitive answer, but it's my belief that we will eventually have every county, every district in the state on the ProCase system. The system in Davidson is the most different. It's most different than what we're doing.
Well, again, I guess my question, as finance folks, are we going to be looking at a significant investment, in a year or 2 years or whenever, in order, because it seems to me the system is only as useful as the participants in it. And if you have Hamilton and Davidson, which are, those are pretty large caseload systems, if they're separate and apart, then we're still not going to be able to access data and do some things that hopefully the ProCase system is going to allow. So my question is, are we going to be looking at additional costs down the road because those systems are not included now?
I could do my best to get you an answer from
All
our
right.
IT
All right,
section.
thank you.
Yes, ma'am.
Leader Lambert.
Madam Chairman, if I may expand that just a little bit to the Administrative Office of the Courts, Public Defenders Conference, our clerks, we don't have a unified clerks system in this state. And you're all over an issue that I have struggled with to try to find an answer, and I know others have as well for years. All of our clerks are locally elected, and they do a fantastic job, and they're primarily county funded. We have offered to kind of pick up some of those expenses over the years, but there has been some hesitation on entering the data from the clerk's system because they're paying their staff through the county to enter data into a state system. But it makes it very frustrating to not have those numbers. So I just wanted to kind of chime in. I know that you all may not be able to necessarily provide all of that information, but maybe through the District Attorney's Conference, the Public Defender's Conference, and the Administrative Office of the Courts, hopefully we could get some sort of an idea of, while I understand there would be a significant amount of push-up back for a unified court system, but some sort of data repository that we've talked about for years so that we could literally just pull this data. Y'all have done a great job of pulling this data from your own systems, but it goes way beyond just the DA's conference. I mean, I'd like to know, exactly what's going on in the court system on convictions on a certain number of cases, on how many charges are out there, and potentially even bringing the TBI into that conversation as well. I just wanted to kind of piggyback on that, just bring up if we could potentially get some of those different groups working together. I'd like a very holistic look at kind of what that data system would look like if we were to invest the money. And I'm not saying at this point we would, but I think it goes way beyond just what the district attorneys have, but kind of all of those systems, because we don't have that right now.
Well, and we will have the Office of the Courts will be here and we can talk about that. But I think, all of those, they're different silos within that, and getting all of the DAs, if you don't even have all of the DAs on it or all of the public defenders, then it's a longer hill to climb. And I'm just curious as to what it would cost to get us to the top. Chairman Hawk, you're recognized.
Thank you, Madam Chair, and thank you guys so much for being here. We really appreciate your work and the conversations we have on a frequent basis. I want to talk a little bit about your reserves. The historic size of your expungement fund had been around $500,000. Now, with legislation we passed in 2019 with criminal justice reform, we have removed those fees, no longer expungement fees. How is this? Obviously, it's affecting the fund. We're at about $138,000 now, or at least that's the information you gave us last. How are these funds currently being utilized, and is it just soon to go away, and how can we replace those dollars? So if you could answer those, please.
Yes, sir. the fund balance accumulated over the couple of years where the fee was in place, and we did not have many expenditures. There was a potential, if that continued, to actually fund some assistant DAs but it's tied to districts. We're not going to take the expunction funds that are generated in one district and expend them somewhere else. So it took a while to get a balance of the kind you mentioned. When it was ended, they've been spent for training and equipment, that sort of thing. And they'll continue to be used for those sorts of things until they're exhausted and there's no money replacing it. So you have any, that's.
Thank you. Representative Garrett, you're next on the list.
Thank you, Madam Chair. Thank you all for being here. I really appreciate your testimony, and you hit on my question quite a bit with the comparison from states and caseloads, et cetera. But it looks like there's 38 full-time positions that are included in your proposed budget, and there's 49 vacant positions. And I guess we're curious why we are creating new positions while we still have some vacant positions open. So we're kind of wondering the correlation between those two.
Would you repeat how many that you have for?
We said there's 49 vacant positions, but you're requesting 38 more. So I understand they may not be the same, but we've got vacant positions and we want creating more. Where's the emphasis on filling the ones that we have vacant now? Fair enough.
There are 3 or 4 different things going on with that number, I believe. We abolished about 12 positions, and I don't know, I would have to think that they're included. So there's some positions that are showing up that are abolished, is my strong belief. About 12 or 13 from last year. So if you subtract that, then, 37, 8, some of those are going to be child support positions. I think there were 9 or 10 vacancies within child support, and that shows up in the information, I'm sure. But that's really separate from the criminal aspect, and not all DAs do child support function. Certainly in the big cities, it's done privately. It's not operations as big as the criminal side, the child support function. But those are all, I'm certain, all caseworkers, very low paid, that sort of thing for that. So that subtracts probably another 8 or 9 or 10, maybe even. When we're getting down to the high 20s or so, I think when you subtract those out, I'm aware of about 10 that have been filled in the last month. And that's information that we have where the DA said, what does this person qualify for? I've got a vacancy. It's been vacant for a month. I want to put them in there. And so, getting it done, but most of the time the information has a lag. I would say that there's just a certain process in place that things may be open for a month or two, but we don't have any long-term vacancies. General Whitley in Sumner County, he lost 2 assistant DAs in the last months. One went to another state agency, Department of Agriculture, needed a lawyer. One, I think, went to private practice. And that's the first time he's had people leave that really didn't retire in a long time. He had to look to find someone. Took him a while to find the right person that wants to do that work. So it wasn't open that long, but that's emblematic of you've got to search for the right person to fit in those spots. I don't think we have a rolling vacancy of any significance at all.
Okay. All right. Thank you very much for the answer. I appreciate that. Thank you.
Be glad to give you specifics.
Okay.
If you would, because our information shows, 38 vacant positions, and it shows, that you're asking for, 38 full-time where you have the 49 vacant positions. And as Representative Garrett said, I recognize those are not apples and oranges, but if you could also give us a little bit more information on what those 38 positions, how many of them are ADAs, how many of them are support, just what those positions might be.
be glad to do that.
Thank you. Representative Ogles.
Hello. Thank you, Madam Chair. You just touched on my question, actually. And September 1st, 2022, we established a 36 judicial district. There were 6 positions were allocated for that. We also created funding for 4 additional positions. The question is how many of those positions have been filled?
No positions have been filled.
Okay.
Because until we have a district attorney elected, no one, that would be the person who'd make the choices on the assistant DAs, and I think 3 secretaries district-wide, a criminal investigator or 2, and a victim witness person or 2. So until we get a lot closer to the election, and maybe there's no contested election, qualifying comes and goes, we'll be working with someone if we find out that there's not going to be a contested election, and there are some of those out there this time where no one's challenging the incumbent, and we know we've got somebody in place already, but we don't know who's going to be in the 22nd of the 32nd district.
And I was just going to add to that, from our information as well, they're not actually realized in our system yet. They're there, but the funding and the positions have not been active to us, so we can't fill them or have access to them.
They're not being used elsewhere to be shifted and forced on someone who is elected in August and it takes office in September.
Representative Ogles.
Thank you, Madam Chair. And I think that gives some clarification to why the numbers and our roles are not quite matching up to, us being more accountant based and looking at spreadsheets. Thank you for clarifying and explaining the practical application to that. Thank you. And I'd also just like to say we appreciate the great job y'all are doing. Y'all's roles and the amount of caseload is just overwhelming. And I just hope going forward, we put a lot of resources into expungement and cleaning up kind of records for criminals. I hope we put as much resources towards convicting people that have committed crimes and giving you all the tools that you need to do your job effectively. So thank you.
Thank you.
Representative Shaw.
Thank you, Madam Chair. Thank you for being here today. We appreciate all the work that you do. I have kind of a 2-part question with my very limited knowledge about law, but I wanted to ask, you talked about the caseload. You've got to do more than most states. When you compare with other states, what tools do they have that you may not have that could help you to reduce those caseloads or move them out faster, if that's a proper statement? And the second part of my question is, what partnership do you have with defense in terms of educating our people on their rights, in terms of diversion and that type stuff when cases appear? And if you understand, again, I'm very limited in what I know, but if I'm making any sense, could y'all talk on that a little bit?
Well, thank you, Mr. Shaw. On the first aspect, we always want to have more tools. For years, you had 2 things, either a hammer or you let someone go. And I mean, just please don't do this again. There's no middle ground here, treatment and all the things that we're looking for alternatives. We do want to have more and more alternatives. At least that's what I think the mood is. Try to find some alternatives to incarceration. So I think we're pushing on to that as much as we can, taking the direction from the General Assembly, the governor. But I don't know that any other state's going to have more tools to move things through any quicker. It takes more time and resources to have the specialty courts that deal with problems that to treat people alternatively. If we just, indictment, trial, conviction, sentencing, that's 1, 2, 3, 4, 5 steps. The other is several steps, determining who's eligible for the alternatives and so forth. We do have partnerships out there in the districts with Defense Bar, and I think some of those you may be able to speak to.
Sure. So
And
when
I'm sorry, I've been remiss. If for the record, you could just state your name and title.
Zoe Sams, Deputy Director for the conference. In regards to diversion, I would say that our role is especially when you have offenders, defendants who are in general sessions court. And so it may just be their first interaction with the criminal justice system. And so our role in that process is to look at the offense committed, the facts of the case, but then also consider that person's criminal history. And in that way, we work with the defense to understand the drivers of crime. And then the defense attorney or the public defender then communicates that with the defendant. But that we have to rely on what information or criminal history is accurate. And sometimes that can be a struggle. And I think we've spoken about that before. In Tennessee, sometimes you will pull a criminal history and maybe only 60% of it is completed. And there may be an arrest, but you don't know what the resolution of that case is. And that can have an impact on being able to understand at that exact moment whether or not someone is eligible for diversion.
In addition to what you just said about not knowing the whole case, does that have anything to do with the system you use? For instance, if Johnny Shaw commit a crime in Nashville and then go to Baller and commit a crime, what would you know in correlation with those two crimes about that person?
I would say that sometimes it's difficult because since we do not have a unified court system, you may not know what is happening in one jurisdiction versus the other unless that information is being reported to the administrative office of the courts and then to Department of Correction and then to TBI. So we have to rely on that everyone is going through the proper steps to be able to do that.
Representative Miller.
Thank you, Madam Chair, and thank you all for being here. And as I was writing my questions down, I was wondering why Representative Shaw was looking at these.
Now you accuse me of copying.
No, thank you for your questions because I pretty much do a follow-up based on the comparison between Florida with 21 million people and 570 cases, ADA, and we're at 2,000. And all the questions that have been asked in reference to that, I'm still wondering, have you all given us an answer on why?
And that's an excellent question. And I would say two things that we have seen that we can definitely point to. One would be, according to the FBI statistics, we are now the third most violent state in the country. So when you look at comparisons for homicide rates per 100,000 residents, ours is a lot higher than states like Florida. And then the other issue I would say is that we are having, luckily we're having a lot of people who want to move to Tennessee. And so we are experiencing, especially in suburban areas, a lot of growth.
Representative Miller.
Are you suggesting or saying out of the 95 counties in this state, there are probably 2 counties with the highest percentage of crime? That's a question.
I'm sorry, are you asking if it's centered around two jurisdictions primarily?
Correct.
I would say that while there are certain areas of Tennessee that are, of course, higher than others, when we have broken down the caseloads per jurisdiction, the biggest increases in caseloads that we see currently are actually in suburban districts where you would expect to see the biggest population growth. So for example, one of them is the 19th district, so Montgomery County, for example. There's a very high caseload there currently. And so it may not be exactly what you expect, but especially when we dig into the numbers and compared to other states, it seems that all districts compared to other states have a substantial higher caseload.
Madam Chair, last question.
Well, and I might just for clarification, and we're talking caseload, not necessarily crime rate. Those are two different things.
Repeat that, Madam Chair, for my clarification,
The
understanding.
numbers that the DA's conference are sharing with us are caseload numbers, not necessarily, there might be crimes where there are never charges brought. So they're not necessarily crime numbers, they're caseload numbers. Those are two different things.
Which leads to the next question. So are the 2,172, are these new cases?
Yes, we took case filings in FY 2019, 2020. And so these are new cases filed during that time period.
Thank you, Madam Chair.
Representative Ogles.
Thank you, Madam Chair. And this is not a complaint to you by any means, but I am amazed with seeing all the different budget presentations that we've had. I remember, I think higher ed had a $15 million upgrade, and we've got facility upgrades to the tune of 200, 300 million. I find it hard to believe that with such a budget surplus that we're not looking at having a unified court system with as much money we have. I find it appalling that we don't know if somebody committed a crime across the state and you don't have access to that information when you're looking at prosecuting somebody for a crime, and that your office has to work so hard to dig and search and look for that information, and to some degree take the person who committed the crime's word for it and their lawyer's word for it that they haven't done something bad before. The fact that we have a criminal system that is not unified, and we don't know what's happening in these courts. And frankly, I hear there's pushback from the clerks. The clerks need to get on board. This is a victim's rights, and it's time to change this system.
Representative Sparks.
Yes. Let me ask, as you know, America, we incarcerate more folks in China. Kind of alarming right there to see that. My county's been in the media a lot. We had the PCC lawsuit. They were charged they paid out $14.3 million being charged with extortion. But those are tax dollars that could be used for vocational school, for teachers, for substitute teachers pay, for nurses in our school system, mental health and other areas. My county's in the media once again. We're going to have a tax increase because of a recent lawsuit. My taxpayers don't like it. I don't like it. But let me ask, how does something like that exist? How does this linger on so many years, specifically the PCC situation?
Representative, you're referring to a lawsuit that surrounded maybe some stores that were selling.
No, that's another lawsuit that we're paying out for.
That's the one I'm familiar with.
That's a whole nother lawsuit that we're paying out for. No, it was on the private probation company that they settled for 14.3. This is in 2018.
I can't give you any information on.
Okay.
I don't know.
It just seems like, when I look, and we're the finance committee, and we're looking at tax dollars, and we've got an opioid crisis, mental health crisis. It just seems like there's not enough advocacy to really look at exploring maybe options to really help those when 55% of those incarcerated right now on psychotropic drugs, probably 70% are alcohol drug related. It frustrates me when I see that my county having these lawsuits and the tax dollars go out, and it's like, man, we could look at what could we could done to help people with all those funds that we have paid out, millions of dollars, and then it's costing us $28,000 to incarcerate an inmate when there's so many options out there that we could leverage. The faith-based community teen challenge, Celebrate Recovery. We've got a new Greenhouse Ministries that built a nice 1.2 million that has beds that they can help. Men of Hope is another example, but it just frustrates me, and I know it frustrates the 70,000 people that I represent when they are fixing to paying the property taxes now. Doesn't seem like we're doing a great job of managing those resources. I'm just asking you maybe for advice to folks back home.
The only thing I would add is that I'm not sure the role of the district attorney in that particular, I just don't know about this matter. But again, I think the alternatives, and the governor suggested that we pursue alternatives. We were already pursuing alternatives, those specialty courts that we listed early on. Those things have been innovations of the district attorneys. I mean, the drug courts and the human trafficking courts, veterans courts, if they're developed, it's not really a new court. It's an existing court. It's a special docket for that type of case. We're very invested and very involved in that.
And you agree they've been very effective?
Yes, sir.
Yes, sir. Thank you, sir.
All right, thank you, Mr. Jones, Director Jones, and Ms. Sams for being here and answering our questions today. I would like to go back. We've asked for some follow-up information, and I'm sorry, I got distracted here. But the information that we have, again, as late as yesterday, showed those vacancies as we stated them. So if there are 12 of them that are no longer there, then the information that you all have provided to us that's what we're relying on. So if you could correct that and also let us know what the new information, the new positions that you're requesting, as I ask what sort of roles those are, then we would appreciate that. Now, there may have been another follow-up or two.
You asked for information, on the system, the data system.
Right.
Yes, ma'am.
Yes, so if you would get that to us, if you get it to my office, then we'll share it with the committee as a whole. Again, thank you and for being here.
Thank you. Thank you all.
Great stats. Guy was adequate.
I'm not, well, from what the DA's answered on that question, I'm not sure, even though we've put the position in there, I'm not sure they hire on for the election based on what Guy said. So there's no reason to ask that one. The last one.
Oh, yeah. So.
Get us out of here quicker.
Thank you for coming forward. We are trying. There's weather coming in, and people are hungry, and all of that. So we'll try not to be hangry and take it out on you. But welcome to our public defenders, and we would just ask you to invite you to go ahead and begin your presentation.
Sure, and my presentation is very brief. My name's Patrick Froeg. I'm the director of the Tennessee District Public Defenders Conference. To my right is Chelsea Curtis. She's the deputy. To my left is Mark Wood. He's our fiscal director. Thank you for listening. Ours is a very simple budget, I think simpler than most departments. We're about 91 to 92% payroll and benefits. So all of our budget, or most of our budget, has to do with people. And that's where we really focus our budget requests, is on adding positions where we can. About really 2 years ago, we finally came to the end of a technology project that we started in 2017 to try and collect data in a unified way for all of our public defenders' offices. And that led us to be able to really engage in something that we haven't had in Tennessee since 2007. The comptroller is mandated to do a weighted caseload study for the public defenders and the district attorneys, but they haven't been able to do that since 2007 because there were no funds allocated for them to do it. I can't do everything they can do at the comptrollers, but our new data system that is unified except for Memphis has their own system, did allow me to really do the math that the comptroller used to do. And so I was able to present to F&A and the governor's office our needs. And it's based on a study that was started in the 90s, a weighted caseload study. So rather than looking at raw numbers of cases, we can, distinguish between, for example, a murder and a driver's license case. Using that formula that the comptroller used, we had a statutory need, a caseload need of about 89 lawyers. So then we went and surveyed all of the districts and said, what do we really need to request? And we came up with a list, and I went to the governor's office with about half of that. And that guided our request. From that, what I'm presenting on this slide is all of the improvements that are in the governor's proposed budget to this time. That's about 40% of what we asked for in terms of the numbers of people. The first three, the statutory pay plan and the increase for Shelby and Davidson, those numbers are statutory. So, we put them in the budget request as improvements, but I don't have any say as to whether to request them. They're just what we request. In addition to that, the governor's budget included 7 new attorneys positions, money for those, 3 legal secretaries and 7 investigators, and 3 social workers. We have started a pilot project using grant funding for social workers, and we've expanded that a little bit into a few state positions. And the expansion listed there on your slide, that's really just positions that are added to the budget, but we absorb the cost internally. So those were also in the governor's budget. And then the other 2 positions for the new District 32 that's scheduled to go online in August that was mentioned in the last hearing. We don't know who those people are. We don't have money for them yet until those elections happen. So we requested, I don't know, more than that. I can talk about that if you'd like. I don't know which you would like to be presented, but this is what's in the governor's budget so far, and we're thankful for that much.
Thank you, Mr. Frog. I guess I have several people on the list, but just to kind of piggyback on what you said there, if I understood you correctly, you had 89, the overall need came out at 89 positions. Then you went to the districts and cut that about in half, and then you got 40% of what you asked for in the budget.
That's about right.
Okay.
I mean, the math is close. And I just want to qualify, when the 89 positions was using a formula that's from 1999, before there were body cameras. I'm just looking for data. I wanted to present the administration with something, how do we quantify what we do? And all we had to get a caseload study done is a significant, takes data researchers to go out into the districts. It's a significant undertaking. So I just used what we had and used an old formula. I don't think any other state is using a formula from that time period, but using that old formula, that's what it said we needed.
And you may not know the answer to this, but we just heard from the previous group, and they had a raw number of, per attorney caseload. If you didn't try to divide out the driver's license versus the murder, if you just looked at raw numbers, do you have any idea what that caseload would be?
About 1,000. Give or take, but again, that's not weighted. I don't like. I'm hesitant to use that number because I don't want that to become a thing. We're doing more than there's a national standard that's been in place from the federal government since the 70s. And according to that standard, we need about 225 lawyers. So I think we're doing about 1,000 cases, but that's including driver's licenses and homicides. And that's ballpark. I can get you an exact number. I get hesitant because I don't Memphis is on a different data reporting system. The rest of the state, we're all on the same data reporting, and it's great, but Memphis has its own. And so I want to be careful with if I commit to a number like that, but it's about that.
And are there any plans to move Memphis onto the same system?
We're a little bit different than the DAs you just heard from, because Memphis and Nashville both had public defenders offices when we were created. They're still a part of the conference per statute. They vote on big conference matters, but their money is separate. So the money that the state provides Davidson and Memphis really just passes through me like a block grant. So I think Memphis, I think the whole county is on a system. I want to say that it might be called Phoenix, where they're trying to have unified data reporting for all of their agencies countywide. And so there are no plans to get Memphis on that system.
All right, thank you. Chairman Williams, you're recognized.
Thank you. Thank you for coming today. I just wanted to see if you could give me an update. In the 1920 fiscal year, I think $678,000 was appropriated for the PD's to establish an appellate division that includes secretaries and other things. Just wondered if you could give us an update on that new division that you stood up, what the process is, progress is, and are you able to hire people to do it? Could you give us just an update on what's going on there?
Yeah, it's one of the things I'm proudest of since I've been here, frankly. We needed that. The DAs have the Attorney General's office, which does a great job, and we were absorbing our own appeals. We created a very small appellate division. It's 6 lawyers. We were able to hire lawyers, get those lawyers in place, and start working, and then the pandemic happened. Frankly, that wasn't the worst thing that happened to our appellate division, because trials stopped for a significant period of time, jury trials. So appeals were slow, and that allowed us to get sort of up to speed over time. The caseload there is about almost exactly what we thought it would be, maybe a little down, but it's coming back up as the backlog in the trial court starts to work its way through.
So obviously COVID hits, the courts are shut down. I guess the question is, how many cases do you expect to utilize? If everything ramps back up to where it is now, how many cases, the chair lady asked about how many other cases you're defending, but I wonder how many appellate cases.
Appellate cases, the reason it's so small is because we exclude the urban districts because they have appellate lawyers there. And about 150 appeals a year is what we handle.
Okay.
So 6 lawyers, 25 a year. That's the ABA standard for what an appellate lawyer should handle.
Right. And the funnel of work, appellate work, you think will be fully functional by the end of the year or by the summer? Or?
I can't really say exactly,
Okay.
but I think that's about right.
Okay. Thank you.
I do apologize.
No.
I think the
I don't have any other questions. Representative Shaw.
Thank you, Madam Chair. And by the way, Mr. Chairman, the pizza was good. Thank you. Thank you for coming today. And I really, although I know you all are just the opposite from the DAs and what you do and who you represent, but I did want to ask kind of the question I asked a while ago. With the staff that you have, and I know you're much shorter than the other side, do you have any kind of educational program for our citizens that you can offer or do offer at the end of a case or however it might be?
I think I understand. I mean, one of the unique things about Tennessee is that our public defenders are elected like the DAs. And so that kind of lends itself to, I think the public defenders here, maybe more than other states, are more inclined to be in the community. We also used to offer expungement education for communities, but we don't have a formalized system that's statewide. Individual community defenders engage in education where they can. I think the problem since I've been here about 5 years now, if you ask any public defender what's the number one problem, and you don't exclude resources, they're all going to say resources. So we've really focused on adding positions to the conference for about the past few years so that our elected public defenders can do more of what you're talking about. So yes, we do some. It varies by district.
Madam Chair,
Representative Shaw.
in your opinion, if this is a fair question, would it help maybe to lower the crime rate if we could do more of an educational piece in some cases, some nature of crimes? I find that some people commit crimes because they just really don't know any better. It's just kind of in their nature is what they do. But if we had some ongoing educational piece where we could maybe educate people on certain things, and do you think that would help lower some of the crime rates that we deal with? I know there are some crimes probably wouldn't, but overall.
Sure. I'm not an expert in that, but I can tell you the question that you're asking is what drove us a couple of years ago to try and add social workers to some of our public defenders offices, because I don't think education is going to stop murder.
Right.
But I do think there's a population that gets arrested over and over.
Yeah.
And if they can deal with whatever's motivating them, drug addiction, mental health issues, sometimes education. And so it's sort of outside of our normal mission, but the public defenders can really add to that where we can add social services to that. So yes, I agree with you.
And thank you so much, and thank you for coming today. I appreciate it.
Thank you, sir.
In our earlier, the previous presenter, we talked a little bit about vacant positions and requested positions. I have sort of a similar question for you guys. We're showing that you have vacant positions. We're also showing that you're asking for new positions. Can you just talk, are the vacant positions, we're showing that 8 of those are actually assistant public defenders. So has there been a turnover? Is it like other places that we've heard from, are your folks leaving for the private sector and higher pay, or how are those vacancies occurring, and how do you think you're going to be able to backfill those?
Sure. So I think our overall retention, we had a turnover rate of about 9%. I don't think that's what you're talking about. We looked at long-term vacancies before we came into this hearing, and all but one, there's one long-term vacancy I'm aware of that has to do with particular personnel in a particular district. Other than that, those are all revenue-funded positions. We have, there is a statute that allows individual counties to add a $12.50 cost to their court costs. We've been forced to use those in the past to fund positions. During the pandemic, that revenue dropped dramatically as courts stopped meeting, people stopped paying their court costs, and so those fell off. So all of the vacant positions I'm aware of that are long-term, except one, are revenue funded, and it's due to the revenue not being there. We don't have positions that we're holding back or that we're using for some other budgetary purpose. We're filling positions that we can fill.
So if I can paraphrase, there are no state-funded vacant positions.
Well, just to get the nomenclature right, those revenue funded are actually state funded because it's a state tax, but that's right.
General fund.
That's right. They are, but there's one I know, and they're just looking for a person to fill it, and it's just taken a while based on local circumstances. But other than that, those should all be revenue funded positions. Other than the normal, I don't know what exactly you're looking at. You may see like a snapshot of all vacant positions, and there may be, 9% turnover, 400 or 500 or 400 lawyers. That's going to be. Oh, and there, for example, the 32nd district, there are positions that aren't filled yet. So.
Or we weren't including those in that particular number. Chairman Wendell, you're recognized.
What percentage of your clients have a valid IQ score of less than 80?
What percentage have an IQ less than 80?
Yes.
We don't have that information.
So you don't track the IQs of your clients when you could use that for defense? That's not part of the,
That's not data we collect in every case, no.
so do you have any idea what, I mean, based on the ones that do test, what percentage have an IQ of less than 80?
No, I don't have that information on as terms of what percentage of clients, because we don't do, when we represent a client, we don't take them in and do, and there are those that argue for it, a screening for ACEs or anything like that for every client. Where it comes up though, they're usually competency proceedings. So, but I don't have the answer to that.
That's all.
Are there any other questions? Representative Sparks.
Real quick, going back to Chairman Wendell's question, you mentioned increase in counselors, social workers. If you had additional staff, could it help address what he's saying, going back to the ACEs, childhood trauma, some of those other areas, and maybe help leverage some of these nonprofits, faith-based groups when it comes to mental health and addiction?
Yeah, it's a significant driver of crime, and it's a significant driver of some of our clients is mental health, special needs, drug addiction. And the reason we're trying to add social workers to our offices is we can, public defenders aren't really thought of as affecting public safety in that way, but we really can. There's an entryway there that I think we could have an effect on it that's positive.
My former police chief, she passed last year. I was able to preach her funeral. She was kind of a mentor of mine, Sally Walls, and I used to hear her advocate for that as a law enforcement officer, 15 years ago. She was very outside the box, kind of before her time. She was literally the first female chief in the state of Tennessee. I watched her as a little 10-year-old practice for going through the law enforcement academy when women just didn't do those things. But last year or 2 years ago, we had an opioid town hall that my assistant and I put together. We had about 110 people in attendance, judges, law enforcement, Tennessee mental health, substance abuse. My late, both school superintendents were there. My late school superintendent, I've shared this. I was asking her, is there a silver bullet? Is there one thing that we could do, Chairman? Is there one thing we could do? And she said, here's what she said. She said, the behaviors of these 6 and 9-year-olds are like nothing she's ever seen before. She said, they're disorderly, disruptive, and aggressive. While bringing all these resources to play, there's no place for these children to go to be assessed. And she complimented the Department of Education for trying to address the whole child. That goes back to ACEs and childhood trauma. But she was talking about the behaviors, and this was 2 years ago, 6, 9-year-olds. She said, I've never seen anything like this. She's a 50-year educator, and sadly, she passed a few months after that. But anyways, I appreciate you trying to address that, and hopefully we can help you get the resources that you need to save us money. So it'd be an investment. Thank you.
Thank you.
Well, thank you again for being here today. Representative Miller, you have a question?
Thank you, Madam Chair Lady. Actually, the statement is more toward us, or question for you. And as you've stated, under the social workers positions, and you're looking at 3, but you've just said to us how successful that can be, the social workers. And Madam Chair, I'm just looking at that number and saying, would it be our responsibility as a budget committee to look at that, to listen to exactly what has been said, is successful? If we had more, we could do more. Could we make a decision on that at some point, that if we do anything, we should probably increase those numbers of social workers? And my question would be to you, since you've been able to have social workers, how effective has it been? Can you evaluate, can you verify, can you actually show by the numbers how effective having more social workers have prevented, let's say, recidivism on your part?
Right. So I can say the social worker program, integrating social workers into law offices is not simple. So we are growing it slowly. We have 7 grant positions and 4 state positions. The Harvard Law School Access to Justice Lab actually came down here a few years ago and did something that they've never done, which is they're studying it with a double-blind study. So we had clients screened, half went into social work, half didn't. And they're now in the midst of evaluating the outcome. So I hope by this time next year or maybe the next, I'll have great research to show you exactly whether it works or not. And I'm interested in seeing the outcomes. Anecdotally, I can tell you it works. That there are a lot of people who, are involved in very serious crimes, but there's also a large population that comes in and out and are arrested for very low-level crimes, some they're guilty of. And sometimes those people, when connected with the right resources, they can stop coming back as often. Anecdotally, I can tell you that's true. I hope to have stats soon to show you that that's true.
Thank you, Madam Chair. Thank you.
Thank you. Representative Williams, Chairman Williams.
I answered to all your titles, Chair Lady. Representative Miller, based upon your question before, that's what the appropriations amendment process is. That's part of the reason why we have these hearing process. If there's something that a member finds that they feel like it's important enough for them to champion on behalf of a department, that'd be the place to do it. And so I'd encourage you to do that if it's something that you'd want to do. But thank you.
And again, I think we would all be interested in the results of the study, hopefully, when you're here next year. And while we, as you say, anecdotally and, maybe just we think with common sense, if you had that sort of support, it would improve. But it'll be really interesting to see what a research study, a bona fide research study using double-blind processes you have outlined, if that proves to be the point, and then at what cost?
That's right.
The cost of the social worker versus the recidivism cost, or whatever. Just truly looking at a cost benefit analysis of that whole issue would be. We'll look forward to that.
Thank you.
Thank you again for being here.
Thank you.
And we're going to ask our Administrative Office of the Courts. Pardon us, we're taking care of a few housekeeping lunch items. It's we're multitasking up here, so we appreciate your patience.
No
And
problem.
welcome. I know this is the first time in a long time that the former administrator of the courts, Deborah Taylor Tate, has not been with us, but we welcome the new team and would just ask that you would introduce yourselves as you speak, and we're ready for you to begin your presentation. And don't be intimidated by the fact that you're all that's standing between us and getting out of here.
Thank you, Madam Chair Lady Hazelwood, and committee members for allowing us to present the FY23 budget request on behalf of the court system. It is duly noted that Director Tate would typically do these hearings alone, and it takes 3 people to replace her. So it's not lost on me that it's requiring 3 people to present today. I want to be respectful of the instructions from the committee, and I'm not sure I hit the mark with my presentation slides. So Chair Lady Hazelwood, if you want to stop me at any point, feel free to do that. I am joined today. First of all, I didn't introduce myself. I'm Michelle Long, the 13 days into the job, director for the AOC. I'm joined by Michelle Consiglio Young, who many of you already know. She is our director and counsel for the Division of Intergovernmental Affairs, and Dalton Hensley, who is our director for fiscal services. We're all here to answer any questions that you may have. Let me start by sharing exciting news that you, of course, are aware. And I heard General Slattery say that he lost a very valuable member of his team. His loss is the court's gain. We welcomed newly confirmed Tennessee Supreme Court Justice Sarah K. Campbell and elevated one of our own, Judge John Campbell, to the Tennessee Court of Criminal Appeals. So we're always excited for those changes. Of course, my being here is another change for the AOC. Next slide. So as you know, the AOC provides support to the Tennessee Supreme Court and the entire court system. The governor's recommended budget for the court system is a total of $176,948,200, which represents less than half of 1% of the entire state budget. As you can see on the slide, several of the court system's budget requests have been included in the governor's recommended budget, and we are most appreciative of Governor Lee's support. Now, I will point out that this slide has no particular order to it. The only thing that has any order is the judge's COLA, which you know is statutorily required, and I'm told that the statutorily required requests go first. Everything else you see on that slide has no particular order. So among the court's listed priorities is the Indigent Representation Fund. You know, it is both U.S. constitutionally required, as well as the Tennessee Constitution and many state statutes require the provision of legal counsel to indigent defendants or parties when the law requires it. In 2017, the Indigent Representation Task Force, whose members included Leader Lamberth and Senator Stevens, published a detailed set of recommendations to improve the delivery of legal representation. Many of those task force recommendations have been implemented over the years. We implemented an increase in compensation rates. We eliminated the difference in rates between in-court and out-of-court time. We also was established, as the previous presenter mentioned, the Public Defender's Appellate Office. What remains incomplete is fully funding the task force recommended funding for representation. The task force recommended $20,300,000, which the AOC requested, as you can see on the slide, in 2019. Through the years, including some COVID years, the fund has received appropriations totaling $16,337,700. Our request is a total of $5,788,500, which includes the remaining $3 million. I know this is a lot of numbers, I'm so sorry, but the remaining $3,962,300 to complete the task force recommendation. Included in our request, and I'll talk about that a little later, is additional funding to support a relatively recent change to the Tennessee Supreme Court Rule 13, which governs the appointment of legal counsel and the operations of the fund. Now, I know Director Tate has been before you before and on numerous occasions has talked to you about projections of need in this fund. We don't disagree that the need is ever increasing. However, because of the disruptions of COVID, we find it very difficult at this time to project what the need will be. So now that jury trials are occurring again and courts are addressing any backlog of cases resulting during periods of disruption in the courts, we will continue to monitor the fund closely and report to what we see in the numbers. Something we have noticed in the numbers is the relative growth in child welfare matters. For the first time, we are seeing, I guess the first time since we started tracking this, we are seeing child welfare matters exceeding adult representation. There are any number of pressures on the Indigent Representation Fund, which I know Leader Lamberth understands, and I'm sure many of you understand as well. But this may be an area that will continue to grow and require additional resources. What we do know, however, is with the recent Supreme Court rule change to Rule 13, we know that that will have a fiscal impact on the fund. So the second part of our request includes $1.8 million to address that rule change. So what the court did was to expand, that portion of the fund that allows for reimbursement for experts and investigators to include juvenile cases where juveniles are charged with a serious matter and it requires transfer of that case to an adult court. So with the rule change, now there will be permission to hire experts like psychological evaluations and such in those cases. We estimated that cost would be roughly $1.8 million based on the number of juvenile transfer cases we had seen, which was a total of 377, and then an average cost for those claims, which was roughly $5,500. So as you know, if we're watching the headlines and news stories, if those are any indication, the rise in serious juvenile crimes may result in an ever-growing need in this area, which will be an added pressure on the fund. So again, we will be monitoring that and report back to you. Next on the list of priorities is a request for 5 new judges, 5 new trial judges. The request is based on the comptroller's weighted caseload study, which showed that the districts that demonstrated the highest judicial need based on the average judicial demand for the past 3 fiscal years that the report was done were judicial districts 13, 19, 22, and 23. And I think you heard in a previous presenter's discussion, the growth in the 19th is significant, and you'll note that the request is for 2 trial judges in the 19th Judicial District. In all of the other judicial districts listed there, it's a single request for 1 judge. So the next request was for 3 new staff positions for the AOC. One is a grant writer, and I'm going to try and move a little more quickly through these. One is a grant writer. We simply need the ability, those skill sets that help us go after and implement resources, find funding resources that help with our reliance on the general fund, hoping to proportionately reduce state dollars. A data architect, we've heard many presenters so far talk about the need to reduce the silos and provide more unified ways of reporting data. We have a patchwork system, no doubt, and a data architect is that type of person, and I'm now outside my professional ability, but my understanding is that's the person that can help you take an existing system in our patchwork and figure out how to map it or interface it with other systems. So that's significantly important for us as we in the AOC are working to do that on behalf of all of our case management systems and move to e-filing. The last is a request for, it's a authority-only request to establish a full-time attorney position. We have the funding for that position. We actually employ the person as a part-time attorney now. We simply want to bring her on full-time. Another strategic long-term investment would be that saves money and keeps people out of jail and is consistent with the governor's criminal justice reform is a texting defendants pilot. We began this before COVID hit. It was originally funded as a pilot by the Office of Criminal Justice Programs. The intent is to reduce failures to appear by texting defendants in advance of their hearings, 7 days before hearing and 1 day before hearing. What we know is that from national studies, that texting court dates to defendants reduces the number of no-shows, which then reduces the number of violations and therefore reduces jail time and other expenses to the system. This, to continue this program is $150,000 recurring, and we are delighted and appreciative that the governor has included that in his recommended budget. Next is a request for funds to allow us to stay in our current location. So the AOC is housed in private lease property in downtown Nashville. For many, many years, there's been discussion about moving us out of that space and into the old Library and Archives building. Now that it's vacant, we're hopeful that those discussions will begin again, and at some point we'll be able to move. But right now, on June 30th, our lease expires. And we already know that they are going to increase our rent. So again, we appreciate the governor's recognition of the need and the inclusion in his recommended budget. And then next on the list is we're asking for support for an increase in the salaries of trial judges, judicial assistants. Our trial judges recognized a need in 2019 as an entire conference of trial court judges and approved a request of a 30% increase for their judicial assistant salaries to be implemented in 10% increments over a 3-year period. We employ 145 judicial assistants across 31 judicial districts. These are the folks who support your judges by organizing and managing court dockets for daily, setting scheduling and other types of hearings, editing drafts of orders, and any number of administrative matters. They are invaluable to the efficient administration of justice. Just ask any judge back in your district. In 2019, the General Assembly passed the first 10% increase, and then COVID hit. We are requesting the second 10% increase from the Judicial Conference's 3-year plan to implement a 30% salary increase. This year's cost would be $851,100. So thank you so much for indulging that. On behalf of the judiciary, I want to say thank you for your time. It is my pleasure to be here, and we will be happy to take any questions you have.
Thank you, Director Long. I do have a number of questioners on the list, beginning with Representative Lynn.
Thank you, Director Long. Welcome to your new position. We're happy to have you.
Thank you.
I have a question, and this goes back a little bit in time. In fiscal year 16-17, the division received recurring funding of $1.7 million to the AOC for the creation of a data repository that would collect general sessions caseload data. Can you give us an update on what the status is of that repository, and will the general sessions court data be deposited? Will all general sessions court data be deposited into the system?
So I am pleased to say, in response to your question, that in January of 2021, the 86 Tensys counties, those that already use our Tensys case management system, did go live in the General Sessions data repository. We're now in that phase of this program where we're struggling, like presenters before, to bring some of our larger counties on board. Hamilton, Knox, Shelby, and I'm joined by, I may have to phone a friend for this one, our IT director is here as well, but That's where we are now, bringing the larger counties on board. I hear words like interfacing and mapping and those words that are not my words. I'm a lawyer, I'm not an IT professional, but that is where we are in that process. So it's not the majority of the data, because of course the larger areas have the majority of the data, but our 86 Tennessee counties are live with the General Sessions Data Repository.
And approximately, I'm sorry, Madam Chairman.
Go ahead.
Approximately how many counties would that be that are functional with this?
Well, it's 86.
Oh, 86,
86
okay.
counties.
86 counties, okay. All right, thank you.
Okay.
And just,
I got the blessing that I'm right.
just a follow-up on that. So you mentioned the larger urban counties that are outliers or not a part of that system. But if my count is right, that's 9 counties and we don't have that many urban ones. So what smaller counties are not included at this point?
So I do have a map here. Okay. So the 9 counties are Anderson, Carter, Monroe, Davidson. So it's broken down by court, correct? Okay, so Davidson Civil, Davidson Criminal, Davidson Traffic, Hamilton Civil, Hamilton Criminal, Knox Civil, Knox Criminal, Marion, Henderson, Shelby Civil, and Shelby Criminal.
So while my friends in Oak Ridge might take issue with this, but so Anderson, Carter, Monroe, and Marion and Henderson counties are some of our more rural counties. Is there a reason that they are not participating as the other 86 are? I mean, the urban counties, I know they have their own systems and there are those kinds of barriers, but for those smaller ones, and are there plans to bring them on board?
I'm going to invite Brandon Bowers, who is our director for our Information Technology Services Division, to respond.
Mr. Bowers, thank you.
Thank you. Happy to be here as well. In answering the question, they are part of our phase 2 of the General Sessions Data Repository project. And currently they are in the database design process, which takes approximately 2 weeks, but we are in the, I guess, process of bringing those counties on board. They are part of phase 2.
And when do you expect that to be fully implemented?
We had hoped to have them completed before the turn of the calendar year. So at this point, looking at where they are with tasks to complete, I would say they are roughly 20 weeks out.
All right, thank you. And again, I think there's a lot of interest in this body, just for as much coordination among the court systems in our state as we can possibly get, at recognizing, again, there are counties who've invested in their own systems and don't feel the need or see the value or just it's a hassle to change systems. We all recognize that, but I certainly think that's a goal that we would like to see us move forward, because there's so much information out there, caseload, all of the things that we've been talking about here today that you really can't get an accurate handle on because of that lack of centralized reporting. So anything that you all can do to push that ball down the field, we very much appreciate it. Representative Shaw, you're next on my list.
Thank you, Madam Chair. Thank you all for being here today. Appreciate you being here. Back in FY 17-18 and then fiscal year 18-19, there was a total of $3 million appropriated to the AOC to provide grants for courtroom security. Have all those funds been appropriate, those grants been appropriate, awarded to the counties?
Representative Shaw, yes, they have. And those funds we are most appreciative of because they allowed our courts to achieve compliance with at least the 2018 courtroom security protection measures.
Can you tell me how many are meeting the minimum standards for compliance and what needs still remain at this time, if any?
So as I'm looking at the spreadsheet, there are, it looks like 3 counties that Crockett, Decatur, and Fentress that are needing, oh, and one more, Houston, that may not have every aspect. The 4 things that were required were bulletproof clerk workspaces, clerk panic buttons, certain signage, and some mirrors, inspection mirrors. And so those counties, it looks like, may have 1 or 2 outstanding items.
Follow up.
Now, I will say that this is a response to a survey. And oftentimes when we survey, one time we get one answer, and
Yeah.
then we survey again, and there's somebody else answering the survey, and we get a different answer. So I will say
Okay.
there's probably some noise like that in these responses.
I did want to ask you though, does any of this have to do with the local folks completing it themselves, or would that be, whose responsibility, I guess, better question, it is to make sure that all of these meet compliance and so forth? Can you talk a little bit about that?
So we do encourage, facilitate, cajole compliance because
Twist on.
we have, due to the graciousness of the General Assembly, the money for them to do it. The purchasing is actually done at the county level.
Okay, thank you. Thank you, Madam Chair.
Chairman Whitson.
Thank you. Thank you, Madam Chairman, and good seeing you folks. And appreciate what all y'all do for our citizens in Tennessee. You may have touched on some of this, but in our questionnaire that we sent, y'all indicated that the Indigent Defendants Council Program has a total of $41.8 million in state funding. And the question is, how is this program funded? Is it through a recurring state appropriation, or is there a percentage of a fee or tax which is deposited into the program?
It is funded through a recurring appropriation, and any unexpended funds revert back to the general fund.
Okay, thank you, ma'am. Is there okay, and has this growth in the program, has there been growth in the program in the recent years for this fund?
So as I was saying in the presentation, the years of disruption from COVID have pretty much been 2 years at this point. And there were, no jury trials for periods of time off and on. It's hard for us to project right now. So our request is really just to fund the remaining amount of money required from or recommended in the task fund or task force report. We know that there is growth in the child welfare side. We know that the rule change by the court will fiscally impact the fund, but to actually project for you what the trend line is because of the disruption in the courts, that's very difficult right now.
I understand. One of the best educations I had the opportunity to serve several years as foreman of our county grand jury. And I realized then our entire judicial system needs help all across both sides, the prosecution and the defense, and the court system and the judges. And again, thank you very much.
Thank you.
Chairman Williams.
Thank you, Commissioner Long. Appreciate you being here. I appreciate you coming by earlier to the office and meeting with me in person about your new role and how exciting that is. But I did want to follow up on something as it relates to the Board of Judicial Conduct. I know that the board was reset maybe a year or two ago. You had $292,000 of new revenue there. What I would assume is for recurring revenue. what I would assume is for additional positions. And so wondered if somebody could give me an update on that. And then I had a follow-up question about that as well.
I will turn to Dalton Hensley.
Okay.
Yes, Dalton Hensley, Fiscal Director. Yes, so the board received the additional $292,000 recurring to fund the three staff positions of the board to bring them on as state employees. Formerly, they were contract employees, and given the nature of their work and confidentiality, we needed them to come under the guise of the state.
So just some insight from the legislative perspective. Does the board have a policy set in place that if certain thresholds are met, that there would be certain actions that the board would take as it relates to conduct? Or is it more esoteric based upon how they feel at the time? We make laws. People unfortunately break those laws, but we know if you do X, there's a penalty of Y. I guess the question is, are there any parameters for that board?
So because the board is only administratively attached to the AOC, I would have to defer to Judge D. Gay. I'm happy to ask that question on your behalf and provide an answer as to how they go about determining if there are thresholds of conduct or if it's a holistic review each and every time. But I'm happy to provide that answer.
Thank you. I understand he's doing a fantastic job. Glad that he's there. I think he actually resides in Leader Lambert's district. So, but anyways, I understand that. I just, as an outsider looking in, sometimes I'm surprised at what is the result of that committee or board. And so maybe a discussion would be great. If you could make an introduction, that would be fantastic. Thank you very much.
Director Long, I believe you mentioned in your presentation you have your increase in rent because your lease is running out and you're going to have to re-up or be on the street. So, and you mentioned a potential move that you've been looking at for some time to perhaps the library and archives. So, and I should know this, but I don't. What is that building being utilized for at this point in time? Is it empty, or what's the status of that building?
It is primarily empty. We did, I think the Board of Judicial Conduct has been allowed to be housed in that building, but I think those are the only people in the building currently.
Right.
And General Services was kind enough to help us renovate and accommodate the Board of Judicial Conduct.
Right. And do you have any idea, and this is not a fair question, this is a general services question, I know, but do you have any idea of what the cost might be to renovate the library and archives building in a way that would make it a satisfactory home for you guys?
I've seen estimates. I don't recall them off the top of my head, so I might just defer to General Services, or I'm happy to ask on your behalf and provide it to you.
If you could do that. And then I guess the other question on the lease that you're getting ready to sign, were you to be able to move into the court, what's the expiration of the lease? What are the terms that would get you out of that lease if necessary?
So we have a great lawyer negotiating on our behalf, and he has that in mind, that if there's the opportunity to move out of private lease space before the 5 years that they would like for us to sign, he's working on language to address that.
So it is a 5-year term currently?
That is what they would like for us to sign.
All right, thank you. Representative Miller.
Thank you, Madam Chair Lady. And bear with me a moment. Normally what I try to do to go to your website as we're looking at the dashboard, and as I read the responsibility of the Energy Defense Fund is to provide legal services for persons who are constitutionally entitled to legal counsel, but who are found to be indigent by the courts and unable to pay legal fees. And administrative office of the courts, et cetera, administer this funds to pay and compensate attorneys, interpreters, experts, et cetera, et cetera. And going back to let me pull that back up, okay. The fund, as we look at the history of the budget request, which is interesting. What you don't have is 2018, 2017, but I would think that whatever you requested then and what you actually received was a lot less. So let's start again with 2019, request for 20 million. And I look at what was actually received. And then in 2020, you requested more, received less. Why do we have that kind of trend of you requesting more than you ever receive?
Representative Miller, that's a very good question. I don't know if someone on my team can respond to that. Certainly, I was not here in 2019 to know. I don't know the answer to your question.
And thank you all for what you do. Really, thank you. But you earlier mentioned that that there are members of the House and members of the Senate that's on this indigent representation fund. So do you all take the request to, who do you take your request to initially?
So we start with F&A for our budget
Okay.
request.
And in turn, they make that decision based on what you request and what they ultimately say, here's what we're going to offer.
My understanding is that they take the information we provide in our budget hearing with F&A and consult with the governor's office for the recommended budget.
Representative Miller, that's the same process that I believe each department goes through. The AOC is not different in that regard. It's the same. The department does a proposed budget, and then the governor's staff looks holistically at the budget and determines what can be, what they feel can they can afford to fund at any given time.
Thank you, Madam Chair. And I just wanted to, I guess, bring to the attention of this committee that trend. And there is a trend. And of course, it happened before you all got here, but I certainly would like to know an answer from the administration why you continue to deny the request of this particular fund. And unless, Madam Chair, anybody on this committee have an answer to that, I would certainly hope that we can get an answer from the administration, Madam Chair. And thank you.
Thank you. I see no further question. Leader Lamberth.
Thank you, Madam Chairman, and I will say significant funds have been added into that fund over the years, especially since the task force met, and I know it's been referenced several times. I served on that task force. The work still continues, but we've added, to my memory, I mean, literally millions into these funds. And so the rates have gone up, the rates for attorneys, the way attorneys are paid. I mean, we've changed just about every year since the task force report came out. I mean, obviously, due to the pandemic, there have been pauses in that, but it has been every single year there have been additions and changes in strengthening this. Obviously, and Director, you've done a great job of laying out why there is still more yet to do. But I think that task force did good work, and there has been improvement and continues to be improvement in it.
And as we all know, there's never enough money to fund every request. Not even when it's raining money as it is these days, because it seems requests just get larger as well. Representative Ogles, and this is gonna be our last question. There's weather issues, and we're gonna try and get folks out of here.
Thank you, Madam Chair. As we're speaking of that indigency fund, can you describe for us the difference? Is the word indigency, does it mean the same thing in Metro Nashville as it means in Williamson County? Is there a definition that's applied across the state?
Well, what I know is we have a uniform affidavit that has to be completed to establish indigency, and then each judge reviews that form and makes that determination. And just to add, I'm sorry, but just to add there, I did say, and I know it was in a list of numbers, but I did say that the indigency fund over the years from the task force report has been appropriated about $16,337,000. So we're just asking for the balance of that at this point.
Thank you, Madam Chair, and I probably should not have mentioned Williamson County in that question. But my question was more to say, is there subjectivity as far as when our judges look at these forms, or is it a standard? Is it a point system? Is it based on income? Thank you.
So the uniform affidavit that determines indigency asks for employment, asks for information about savings accounts, vehicles owned, mortgages. I mean, it asks the waterfront under oath. So.
All right, ladies and gentlemen, I see no further questions on my list. I want to thank you all for your attention, your participation today. I thank Director Long and your team for, and as duly noted, we will, I'm sure that Director Tate will watch these proceedings at some time, and we will note that it did take 3 of you to replace her, actually 4.
Actually 4, that's correct.
But for someone who's been on the job for, is it 9 days?
13.
13.
And counting.
Then, well, gosh, 2 weeks into it, you've got it not. But we do appreciate the time and the effort that you put into the presentation and the answers to the questions that we ask. Committee, we will be not here on Monday. No budget hearings on Monday. I know the tears are falling, but you'll just have to make do. We will again refer to your new schedule. We will not be having budget hearings next Thursday, so there'll be some new times in your schedule. We would ask that you just pay attention to those and show up at the appropriate time. Seeing no other business, we're back in session, so we are now out of session and adjourned. Thank you.